The movie opens at the airport, where we see Benji waiting for his cousin David to arrive. We then find David, who has just left the house for the airport. He calls Benji and informs him that he is caught in traffic and will take an hour to get there. Following this, with some time gone by, David finally arrives, and the two cousins hug. They check their luggage through security and get on a plane to Poland. In fact, they're headed to Poland on a Jewish heritage tour in honor of their recently deceased grandmother, Dory. On the plane, David immediately gets out his phone to look at pictures of his son, Abe. He's married to a girl named Priya, while Benji is single. After some hours of flight, the two reach Poland and drive to their hotel, where they have a reservation. Arriving in their hotel room, Benji mentions he needs to take a shower. He proceeds with an awkward comment regarding David's feet, that there aren't any weird foot knuckles, stray hairs, or anything like their grandmother's feet. Both laugh as David says he has never evaluated them. After this, they both go to the hotel reception where they meet their guide, James. James then introduces his other tourists, who he is going to guide, Marcia, along with a couple named Mark and Diane, and a Rwandan refugee named Eloge, who converted to Judaism. Benji asks Eloge about his background, which David fears might cause a problem, but Eloge is happy about Benji's curiosity and shares an emotional anecdote with the group. Eloge shares that he and his mother survived the genocide. He moved to Winnipeg with his mother's life savings sewn into the inside of his jacket. After this, the group goes around the city to explore, where they come across a monument of a Polish soldier. James tells them that he always starts his tour from there. He also adds that this tour will involve pain, loss, and suffering. They then wander around the park and go to have a meal. After the meal, James takes the group to Warsaw. He tells the group to take some photographs, but while David just wants to take normal pictures, Benji manages to get the whole group to make elaborate poses, which David takes a picture of. As they walk around, Benji bonds with others like Marcia. The group then comes back to the hotel as night falls, and Benji and David go to the roof to smoke. The next morning, they prepare for their next tour. James takes the group to the train station for their next adventure, and they all board the train. While riding the train, Benji becomes loudly uncomfortable about the fact that they, as Jewish people, are sitting in a train car that would have transported them to concentration camps during the Holocaust. Benji tries to explain about his discomfort indirectly, but nobody really wants to hear anything about that. Frustrated, he ends up going to a different train car with David following him, so he is not alone. After some time, the train stops at a station while David is sleeping. The two get off at a stop, and David realizes they are at the wrong station. Benji then tells him that they already passed the right station while he was sleeping. David asks why he didn't wake him up, and Benji replies that he didn't wake him up because he was having such a good nap. He then comes up with a plan to reunite them with the group without buying new tickets. They get on a train heading in the opposite direction and use the excuse of going to the bathroom to avoid detection by the conductor, moving to the front train car, which happens to be first class. They stop at the next station and manage to reunite with the group, who had their bags waiting for them. They arrive in Lublin, where James tells them that Lublin has a rich Jewish history. It was known for a time as the Jewish Oxford. It was diverse, both culturally and intellectually. During this time, David asks Eloge if he likes religion, to which Eloge says yes. Meanwhile, Marcia approaches Benji and apologizes for what happened on the train, as she did not listen to him. He says it's okay, and they both bond with each other. While they are talking, David and Eloge join them, and the group arrives at a cemetery, where James is delivering his facts about the people buried there. Benji makes another scene, criticizing James for talking about the deceased as though they are just statistics, which makes David uncomfortable. Benji then convinces everyone to place a stone on the grave of a random man as a show of respect for his memory. After this, everybody stops at a restaurant for the evening, where they are having dinner and drinking. They are talking about Jewish culture and the foods they really like. During that time, Benji becomes slightly drunk and makes inappropriate comments before belching loudly and saying he has to pee. After excusing himself, David apologizes to everyone for Benji's behavior. Some, like Marcia and Diane, are sympathetic as they know Benji is grieving the loss of their grandmother Dory. David explains that they used to be much closer, but 6 months earlier, Benji had attempted suicide by overdosing. The group then overhears the sound of a piano in the restaurant before realizing that Benji is the one playing it. Seeing this, David becomes sad about his behavior and leaves the restaurant. He goes back to his hotel room and falls asleep. In the middle of the night, he hears someone in his room and wakes up. He asks the receptionist if they have seen Benji, but the receptionist says no. He calls Benji, but Benji does not respond and then falls asleep. The next morning, Benji shows up at the restaurant and David angrily asks Benji where he was last night. Benji says he was with Marcia, so he didn't wake him. Just then, James arrives to take the group to another place. During the ride, James takes a moment to tell the group that today's tour is going to be quite taxing because concentration camps can be pretty overwhelming. The group arrives at the site of a former concentration camp. While everyone has an emotional reaction to being there, Benji can barely contain himself while sitting next to David. James privately tells Benji that he managed to influence the way the tour was conducted and thanks him for doing so. Later that night, after parting ways with the group, David and Benji sneak into a Hotel Victoria to go to the rooftop to smoke one time. While they are initially friendly, the conversation turns into an argument when Benji suggests that he won't hear from David for a long time after the trip is done. Benji says that David used to feel and cry more than he does now, which David says would feel terrible to do all the time. David, in turn, goes off on Benji for his suicide attempt and expresses anger at Benji for worrying the family like he did. The following morning, just before they go home, David and Benji stop at Dory's old home. Benji shares a story with David about how their grandmother slapped him across the face because he was later to meet her for dinner one night since he was getting stoned. Benji says it was the best thing that ever happened to him, David, then suggests on putting stone on the porch. The two leave stones on the porch as a tribute, but they are noticed by an elderly neighbor and his adult son. The son translates for his father and learns from the cousins what their purpose for their visit is. While they say that it's a sweet gesture, they say it's a bad idea to leave the stones because another old woman lives in the house and could trip on them. So David and Benji remove the stones before leaving. The two guys board the plane and return to New York. As they are leaving the airport, David invites Benji to his home for dinner, but Benji declines as he says that you meet the craziest people at the airport. David slaps him across the face like Dory did, hoping it might influence Benji as well, but Benji just laughs it off before they share a long hug. David returns home to Priya and Abe greeting him happily, while Benji sits at the airport alone once again. In this way, movie ends here. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more interesting movie recaps.